Tonight on Global National, the writ drops in Nova Scotia.
I feel it only right that Nova Scotians should have their say.
Why a potential federal vote motivated the provincial Tory leader to call a snap election. The secretive military facility Israel hit inside Iran. As Iran's clerics mull over if they should retaliate and how. Ontario's plan to make it cheaper for drivers to fill up. But for how long? And why your kids' trick-or-treat haul might be lighter this year.
It got really tougher this year to get cacao.
How inflation is impacting chocolate and what's behind it.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It's been a fall of political intrigue and today another major development. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston has called a snap election. The reason? The Conservative leader says he needs a clear mandate to stand up to Justin Trudeau and the federal government. Heidi Petracek joins us now from Halifax with more. Heidi.
Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative Party leader Tim Houston is squeezing in a provincial election before year's end and about 8 months before the fixed election date next July. A political gamble he's counting will pay off.
When's the big day?
Day's coming up.
Nova Scotia's premier was mum, but his ride from the Lieutenant Governor's residence gave it all away. With voting day set for November 26th, Tim Houston headed straight to a campaign rally and pointed to Ottawa as part of the reason for the early call.
Prime Minister Trudeau has made a decision to try and save seats in Ontario and Quebec at the expense of places like Nova Scotia. And
Houston's argument, Nova Scotia's power position in spats with the federal government would be stronger with a second Tory mandate, leaving political opponents to take aim at his track record over the past 3 years.
And instead of investing this money in health care and housing or in making life more affordable for people, he has chosen to spend $13 million of your money on a needless election.
He was elected with a mandate to fix health care. But billions of dollars later, and the number of Nova Scotians without a doctor has doubled.
The healthcare crisis in particular dogging Houston not only over the past 3 years, but at his own campaign rally.
When are you going to fix health care for me?
Yeah, look, there's work to be done in healthcare for sure.
Her question, one the PC leader will face again from voters on this campaign trail. Houston's PCs go into this election as a majority government. In 2021, his win unseated the governing Liberals of the day because of Houston's focus on fixing health care. The question now for Nova Scotians is whether they feel his government has made enough progress on that and on affordability concerns to win their votes again. Carolyn.
Heidi Petracek in Halifax, thank you. There are, in fact, 4 provincial elections this fall, with voters in Saskatchewan heading to the polls tomorrow. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, is in Regina, where he'll be part of Global's election night coverage. David, what can we expect?
Well, no government in Saskatchewan has won 5 majorities in a row since Tommy Douglas led the old CCF to 5 in a row from 1944 to 1960. So Scott Moe and the Saskatchewan Party have a chance to make history tomorrow. If they win 5, it'll be the first time a party from the right of center has done that. Now, Moe and the Saskatchewan Party have been trying to make the ballot question here all about the economy. They believe that if voters go into the ballot box tomorrow and are thinking about the bottom lines of their household budgets, they will return a Saskatchewan Party government for the 5th time. Their chief challenger is the NDP, led for the first time by Carla Beck. And Beck has been trying to make the ballot question health care. And Beck and the NDP believe if voters are thinking about nurses and doctors, they will vote for change and it will be an NDP government. Now, if that happens, that will be historic as well because Carla Beck will then become the first woman premier of the province. The polls, such as they are, have been pretty much neck and neck. And to put that in some context, 4 4 years ago, the Saskatchewan party beat the NDP by 30 points. So, looks like it could be a closer race this time. There is a common denominator among all these provincial elections, and that's this: incumbent governments facing voters who are frustrated, even angry, and wanting change. In BC, the incumbent NDP government of David Eby hanging on by a thread. Recounts are still happening, but there's definitely voter frustration at play there. 1 week ago, we saw in New Brunswick angry, frustrated voters in there punish the incumbent PCs of Blaine Higgs, replace them with a Liberal government. And if the NDP wins in Saskatchewan Monday, I think absolutely the hunger for change among a disgruntled electorate will be a factor. And now, as we talk about this new election in Nova Scotia, the next provincial election, certainly the incumbent PCs, I think, are the favourites going into it. But the incumbent PC leader, Tim Houston, he may want to look at these other provinces, see that voter frustration. He might want to tread a little carefully. Carolyn.
All right, David Akin in Regina for us tonight. To the Middle East now, where all eyes are on Iran and how it might respond to the airstrikes by Israel early Saturday morning. While Israel says its attacks pounded Iranian defense and missile production sites, Iran's supreme leader says the attack should neither be downplayed nor exaggerated. Now, as Iran weighs its response, other nations are urging restraint. Redmond Shannon reports.
These satellite images give us a new insight into damage caused by Israel's airstrikes on Iran Saturday. A former United Nations weapons inspector says Israel hit a building that was once part of Iran's now defunct nuclear weapons program. Israel says its strikes damaged Iran's ability to mass-produce missiles. Any Iranian response in this tit-for-tat exchange will likely need sign-off from Ayatollah Khamenei. Although Iran's supreme leader said Sunday that other officials would make that call. Khamenei said Israel's strikes were a mistake, adding that they should neither be downplayed nor exaggerated. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the operation achieved all of its objectives, even if he believes Israel's multi-front war has not. At a memorial for the victims of the Hamas October 7th attacks, family members heckled him. Other relatives then confronted the hecklers, a sign of Israeli divisions even among those sharing the same pain. Any nervousness in Israel about what comes next in the conflict only increased after this truck rammed into a group of people, killing one and injuring dozens. Police are investigating it as terrorism. They say the driver, an Israeli citizen, was shot dead by a civilian. In northern Israel, at least 5 people were hurt by the latest Hezbollah rockets launched from Lebanon. The destruction from Israel's attacks on Lebanon remain far greater. Several people killed Sunday after strikes on the coastal city of Sidon. Any prospect of a wider de-escalation still hinges on what happens in Gaza. On Sunday, peace talks resumed in Qatar, and Egypt's President El-Sisi has proposed an initial 2-day Gaza ceasefire, including a limited hostage prisoner exchange, the eventual aim being a permanent truce. Carolyn?
Redmond Shannon in London, thank you. Well, this is hardly the first time ceasefire overtures have been made, but as the world deliberates, the people of Gaza suffer. In what has become a grim ritual, residents pulled 9 bodies from a former school building housing displaced families in Gaza City. Israel is ramping up its assault in the northern part of Gaza, prompting the United Nations Refugee Agency to warn of yet another humanitarian catastrophe. Israel insists it has allowed help to move in, even amid the ongoing bombings. Well, turning now to the U.S. presidential race, Republican candidate Donald Trump is holding a rally at New York's Madison Square Garden tonight. It's an unusually large venue choice for a state Trump is near guaranteed to lose. But he and his Democratic rival, Kamala Harris, are trying to squeeze out as much support as they can, with just 9 days left in the campaign. Reggie Cicchini reports.
In a nail-bitingly close race, time has become a precious resource for the two candidates to make their case against each other.
I see a nation determined to turn the page on hatred and division.
Spending Sunday morning at a Philadelphia church, Kamala Harris embraced her spiritual side without losing focus on the threats she sees in her opponent.
He is full of dark language that is about retribution and revenge.
Kamala Harris, you're fired. Get the hell out of here.
Donald Trump has not been shy when it comes to his fiery rhetoric, seeing America as a crater deepened by Democratic leadership. On Sunday, he planted a flag deep in the heart of blue New York at the iconic Madison Square Garden in a final pitch to his loyal supporters.
He's talking about Harris as a Biden proxy and what the Democrats have done in the last 4 years and what he would do if he's reelected to office.
While Trump has little chance of winning New York, his appearance could help vulnerable Republicans in tight congressional races.
Get on the doors, get this done, let's win this thing.
The Harris campaign has been undertaking a massive get out the vote campaign, which has worked to convince skeptics, even Republicans, to come on board.
You have to appeal to the voters that are like, well, I don't really like either of these. Who do I dislike more?
But she's struggling to connect with male voters, where Trump holds a roughly 20-point advantage. And her campaign believes that highlighting threats to reproductive freedoms could be the key to closing the gender gap.
I am asking y'all from the core of my being to take our lives seriously. Please.
The fall of Roe v. Wade became a motivating factor to get Democrats to the ballot box. Harris's closing message is aimed at broadening the range of people that see this as something that impacts their lives. While Trump seeks to remind his base that Harris broke the country and only he can fix it. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
And on Tuesday, November 5th, you can join Donna and the Global News team for America Votes for a Canadian perspective on this historic election. We'll be streaming live from Washington, D.C., beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, wherever you watch Global News, including globalnews.ca, YouTube, the Global TV app, and Prime. More savings announced today for Ontario drivers. Coming up, what the extension of the gas tax cut means for your budget and how long it will last. There's more relief at the pumps for drivers in Ontario. The Ford government announcing today it will extend a cut to the gas tax until next June. The measure, in place since 2022, has meant a 5.7 cent per litre savings, equal to just under $400 a year for the average household. Matthew Bingley reports.
The Ford government has repeatedly cut its share of taxes charged at Ontario gas pumps, and it's set to continue the trend.
We'll be extending this tax cut through to June 30th, 2025.
The announcement coming ahead of the fall economic update, where it's expected the government will also announce plans to send $200 checks to every Ontario resident.
Yeah, while interest rates have come down, inflation has come down, costs are still very high.
But cutting nearly 6 cents of every liter of gasoline the province could be taking in as revenue will do little to shrink the province's debt, which has grown by more than $80 billion under the Ford government's watch.
We're just prudent fiscal managers, and I have to remind everyone, it's not the government's money, it's the taxpayers' money.
The Premier's political opponents don't see it that way.
It's another example of the Premier putting his own political self-interest ahead of the people of Ontario. All across this province, you're seeing hospitals closed. You're seeing emergency departments closed. You're seeing 2.5 million people without access to a family doctor.
And while the government promises the move will save the average Ontario household about $380, those filling up their tanks on Sunday in Toronto are mixed about how much it will affect them.
Well, I drive far to work every day, so I think that's a good thing.
But I already kind of know what I'm going to vote. Gas prices don't actually weigh into me.
After committing to reduce congestion by putting municipal bike lanes in its crosshairs, and another announcement focused on the pocketbooks of anyone who makes a regular trip to the gas pump, the Ford government is once again signaling that motorists will be a key target when it comes to votes. Carolyn.
Matthew Bingley in Toronto, thank you. In Quebec, the Port of Montreal was paralyzed today after dock workers staged a 24-hour strike. Around 1,200 workers walked off the job, grinding the country's second largest port to a halt until tomorrow morning. This weekend job action comes on top of an ongoing strike about overtime shifts that began earlier this month. The union is demanding higher wages and a new collective agreement for workers who have been without one for almost a year. Ahead, it was touted as a possible solution to Indigenous child welfare concerns. So what happens now after a multi-billion-dollar deal was rejected? On the heels of an historic decision by the Assembly of First Nations chiefs last week to reject a $47 billion child welfare deal, there are questions tonight about how to fix an ailing child welfare system. It's hoped another round of negotiations with the federal government can begin soon, but there's growing concern another generation may be left behind. Heather Yorks-West reports.
I was really devastated by it.
With her own painful experience in the child welfare system, Ashley Bach had been hopeful that an historic agreement worth more than $47 billion would lead to real change.
It was re-traumatizing enough to be at the Assembly and to speak about it. But then actually watching that vote happen and seeing people stand up and cheer was really terrible.
After 2 days of emotional debate, Assembly of First Nations chiefs voted last week to reject the proposal over what some called a slew of flaws within the agreement. It means for now a system Canada's courts have ruled is underfunded and discriminatory for Indigenous children and youth will remain unreformed.
We're potentially going to lose, another generation of children not receiving the same level of supports that non-Indigenous children do.
That disparity has led to tens of thousands of Indigenous children and youth ending up in government care.
I think there's some recalibration that needs to happen, but we can get there.
Cindy Blackstock has been at the forefront of the long legal fight for reform, but she says the AFN was right to reject this deal.
There was a promise of $47.8 billion, but then when you got into the fine print, there was a lot of, well, what ifs? Only if this happened, only if this happened. And it would leave First Nations children in a lot of uncertainty.
Those kids are facing a lot of uncertainty now as well. Both the AFN and the government says it's working to determine next steps.
You can be removed from this and think, it's a negotiation. We'll just renegotiate again. But for those who are actually in the system and experiencing it right now, it's not just a negotiation, it's their lives.
And with a potential change in government on the horizon, Bach fears reaching a new agreement could take a very long time. Heather Yorks-West, Global News, Calgary.
The rising price of chocolate. Up next, how kids may see the impact of shrinkflation on this year's Halloween haul. An emotional and unexpected moment at an Adele concert in Vegas Saturday. Adele was in the middle of performing when she spotted the legendary Seline Dion in the audience. Adele rushed over, bursting into tears as she hugged the pop icon. The moment took place at the same venue that was built for Seline more than 20 years ago when she launched her own Las Vegas residency. Adele's residency ends in November. While kids might be focusing on how much candy and chocolate they can collect this Halloween, parents might want to temper their expectations. Cocoa prices have soared to such an extent that Halloween is the latest victim of shrinkflation, meaning there may be less chocolate inside those wrappers. Taria Isri reports on how producers and consumers are feeling the crunch.
For chocolate lovers, this Halloween may be bittersweet. Catherine Goulet is a geologist turned chocolatier and imports her cocoa beans from Latin America. She's been in the business for 8 years, and this season it's been a challenge to replenish her supply.
It got really tougher this year to get cacao, and the amount were really difficult to find too.
Goulet has had to change her prices and production methods.
The higher percentage chocolate bars, they're really expensive to make right now, so for sure we will make less. It's changing the way we do things.
Food economists say extreme weather has led to a cocoa shortage, which is driving up costs.
Cocoa is a very sensitive crop. 70% of the world's cocoa comes from Africa. And in Africa, we're seeing drought, which is stressing the plants. And we're also seeing, in some circumstances, extreme rain. So it's either very dry or much too wet.
As a result, a U.S. market research firm found confectionery companies are increasingly turning to cheaper candy instead. While marketing professors warn trick-or-treaters may be coming home with lighter bags this year.
You're actually even seeing what some people have termed as shrinkflation, which means that some of the actual pieces of candy or chocolate that you're buying are smaller than they were in the previous season.
Let's say we start.
Goulet suspects high cocoa prices are here to stay.
I think the client, what should understand is climate is changing and this puts pressure on the production. So chocolate will be a little bit harder to create and find. I think it's an opportunity also to eat better chocolate, but maybe less chocolate in quantity.
Calls this Halloween for a different approach to chocolate, from bean to bar. Taria Isri, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada is the Delta Bessborough Hotel in Saskatoon. We love seeing your Canada. Please keep emailing your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Have a great night.